I want all of us to be safe. So if you're feeling, especially if you're feeling a little under the weather, please let our ushers and our servers help the whole community by sanitizing your hands this morning. On the heels of that, I want to lift up a story as I begin. I went off to a seminary in Kentucky, in the Bluegrass State. Excuse me, it's not a state, it's a commonwealth, and they will correct you every time you say that. But I went to Kentucky, the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, and we went to a seminary up there, and we went as a married couple, brand new married couple. We'd been married for about 2 months when we moved up there. And it was a sight to behold. It was us in a U-Haul and a minivan full of every belonging we had in the world, and a dog and a cat. And in arranging to go up and move across country to go to school, we realized one of the startling realities of the seminary we were going to is that there were not a lot of on-campus housing options. In fact, there were practically none. And I knew it was going to be bad, because right before I graduated, I went to one of my professors who had gone to the same school, and I asked him, Dr. McDonald, where did you stay when you went to Asbury? Well, I stayed in the student housing. It was a trailer park in the gravel parking lot behind the school. And at the point when he related to us that student housing was literally a trailer park owned by the seminary, that's when we began to get a little worried. In that first year, we rented a little place, but that second year we were there, we thought we hit a gold mine, because I was working at First Methodist Church downtown on their staff, and one of their realtors had suggested, well, why don't y'all look at getting a house somewhere here in town if you're going to be here for a few years? So we'd taken her up on her advice, and we'd bought this little house for almost nothing that just needed a little bit of work. And if you've ever lived in a house as you've worked on it, you kind of know where this story's going. We thought, as we got this house and we got moved in, well, we'll just do a little bit of work in the kitchen. And then it was like a disease that spread out and took over various wings of the house. And it was not a very big house. And before you knew it, we were sitting there with floors ripped up and cabinets torn out and fixtures off the wall and rooms without electricity, wondering what we got ourselves into. What did we get ourselves into? I'm sure we all have moments in life where we ask ourselves that question. What did we get ourselves into here? How did we get mixed up in all of this? Where is this going? Are there moments in our lives where we feel like Paul as he writes this on the 12th verse of the 13th chapter? I see dimly. I see a little bit, kind of like looking through a foggy glass or mirror. I can see only partially. And in that partial vision, we get disappointed, disheartened, we get confused, but above all, we get scared. We get scared. Because we look into the unknown. We look into the unknown and it frightens us. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at, not really a sermon series per se, but I want to look at two issues. First, what our foundation is. What is it that ties us to the ground when we look into that unknown and we're afraid? And then next week, once we're reminded of what our foundation is, I want us to talk about what the challenges are that the church has in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, in our future. Once we're grounded this week and no longer have to fear, I want us to then look intentionally into that unknown, that we might begin to understand what God's will is for us. But first, the foundation. We all have those points of fear when we look into the unknown. When you're like me and you're sitting there in between two floor joists because there's no subfloor in your dining room anymore and there's nothing but dirt, and wondering what you've done to your life, to deserve such a thing or where you're going from here? It's in those moments that we need to be called back to what our foundation is. It's in those moments of chaos that we can lose sight of who we are and who we belong to. I can tell you in that simple situation, simple might be an understatement of a grand variety, it helped to remember that I was no carpenter, and that it was okay to not go it alone. It was okay to go to my friends who actually build homes and ask them for help, to ask them to come give their opinion, to ask for their input, for the assistance. It was helpful to remember at the end of the day, my foundation wasn't building homes, and I wasn't going to be doing this forever. But that I had something different in store for my life, something, in my opinion, a little bit better. When we encounter those great unknowns in life, when we encounter those points that Paul, I feel, is talking about, when we feel that we're seeing God's love just dimly because of the hardship and struggle in life, those are the points that we have to remember how firmly our foundation is planted on Jesus Christ. When we look into the great unknown and we feel like we can't see fully God's picture for our lives, it's in those exact moments our feet have to feel the firm foundation of Christ, or we will be swept away in that moment. We'll be swept away. It reminds me, as a few of you know, I'm a big Texas Longhorns fan, much to the chagrin of all of you Aggies out there, and the handful of folks that went to Tech. And there's some TCU folks out there, I know. But it made receiving that mustard email from you this week that much more effective. Granted, I knew that was going to my wife. But Texas played for the national title in 2009 against Alabama. If there's a team everyone loves to hate more than the Patriots, it's Alabama. And they were doing so well. In fact, the first quarter of that game, Texas was cleaning up against the Crimson Tide. And some of you who are really big college football fans might remember this. But then a key thing happened that changed the game. Texas's quarterback was injured and could not return to the game. And they put a second-string quarterback in who had zero playing time, zero experience, and he was a freshman. They put an 18-year-old guy in to play quarterback on the biggest college football game of the year. And you could see him overwhelmed on national TV. And it was such a big game, you can go on YouTube and you can still watch him be overwhelmed. He was throwing against the top passing defense, the team that could shut anyone down. And here it was, someone with almost no experience, full of youth and terrified. You could just watch him be blown over by Alabama, quite literally in some plays. And I bring that up because that's what life is like for us if we don't grab onto that firm foundation. If we don't feel the firm foundation of Christ beneath us when we encounter storms and when our doubt on God's love is raised because we can't see it fully like Paul relates to us today, that's what happens if we don't firmly feel the foundation. We get blown away like that by life, Whether it is work, or it's school, or it's family situations, or it's money. You can pick any one of your issues, and I guarantee you, they will blow you away if you don't have that foundation and don't stand firmly on Christ. Jesus knew this, and he related it to the folks around him by saying that two people built homes. And one guy built it on a sandy bank. Imagine going down to the Brazos River and building the home quite as close to the water as you can. I mean, you go out your front door and you're in the river. And he said there was another guy, and when he built his home, and he built it up on the rocks. So imagine coming up a ways from the river, finding a nice rocky, outcropping, firm, and setting your home on that. And he said the floods came, and what happened to the first home? It was washed away. Or in our case, the dam decided to let a little water out, and the home was gone. But the guy on the hill, on that firm foundation, his home remained. Our foundation as a church, that rock that we build ourselves individually and as a community on, is Christ. And what does that mean that our foundation is Christ? What does it mean that we build firmly on Christ's foundation? That if we build our foundation on Christ, we're called to love God. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but I guarantee you it's a lot harder than it sounds. We're called to love God more than we love our personal preferences, more than we love the way we think things should be done, more than we love the fact that it's never been done that way before. If we build our foundation on God and we really rest on it, we have to love Him above all things. He's first in our life. But then the second, which follows hand in hand, is that we have to love each other. And I'm not talking about just each other sitting here. I'm not saying the choir members can only love the choir members. The folks out there can only love each other who are out there, or the Methodists can only love the Methodists, or the Christians can only love the Christians. I'm saying that God calls us to love each other in the broadest sense of the term. We're to love all of the people. Because all people are created in His image. Not just the folks that agree with us, but all people. If we plant our firm foundation on God, we love God, but we love the people we encounter, even the ones we don't like. And as a church, we're called to build that foundation there. As people of Christ, we're called to build the foundation there. And to, in our lives, exercise that love of God in the way we conduct our lives and ourselves, but also, hand in hand, exercise that love of each other. Because if you fail to love each other, your love of God seems void in the presence of the community. And if you fail to love God but only care about each other, then you're just doing community service. As people who build our foundation on Christ, we must love both God and each other. Because to do anything different is to build your foundation upon the sand. So I encourage you today. I know the world feels like it's going to hell. I know if you turn on the news, it's a 24-hour carousel of crisis and debate and panic. I know if you go to the hospital right now, it's completely full. And they're so busy because everyone's sick. I know as people of Christ, we look into the world, and it's like we're looking through a cloudy glass, seeing dimly. But I promise you, if you stand on the firm foundation of Christ, loving God and loving all, that day will come, just as Paul says it, that you will know that love completely. You'll look into the world, and you won't be seeing the love dimly. You won't be discouraged. It won't look like chaos. But you'll look into the world and know God's love completely. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.